All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to episode 92 of the On-Air Advocate, where at the On-Air Advocate, we look to provide education, support, and empowerment for all of those with different abilities, mental and medical illnesses, and their caregivers. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Tammy Flynn, and I am the host and producer of the On-Air Advocate, and I am super excited that you are here this morning joining us, or whether you are catching this on the replay. Now, as always, if you think any of the content that we are talking about this morning could be relevant for anyone within your circle, in your network, please hit the share button and share the love with others. Now, as you guys know, last night we just kicked off our Epilepsy Awareness Week. And with that, I feel that here at the On-Air Advocate, we so much of the time talk to, doctors, medical providers of kind, supports, as well as parents that have traveled this long journey and that they're all the way through their journey, or they've been on it for a decade or so, and they've learned so much along the way, and they're sharing those nuggets. Well, today I wanted my friend Amanda to come on today. She has started her new journey, and this journey has only been a year for her. And she actually has two children that have complex medical issues. And so I wanted her to share a little bit of that this morning, what they have going on. And then we're going to get into a little bit more of a real talk discussion versus a formal interview that we regularly do, kind of looking at those top 10 things that are so frustrating as parents discover that their children or their young adults have epilepsy. So Amanda, thank you for doing this. This is her first time on a live. So everybody welcome her.
Thank you. So my story started last October. My daughter was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And that was a hard blow to our family. We didn't really know what to do with her. And then as we slowly figured out how to manage her diabetes, about a month later, my son had a seizure. So then we had another diagnosis of epilepsy and how to deal with that as a family and how to manage both of the kids.
And both of their care. Now, can you take us back to that time? When did you find out? I mean, you found out at that point that he had it, but what was, kind of paint the picture for us, the day that, you were aware, and did you even know at the time that it was happening, that whether it was a seizure, how did he get diagnosed with the epilepsy?
So after my daughter was diagnosed in October with diabetes, about a week after her diagnosis, I was sleeping on the couch with her. We kept her close for lows and different blood sugar issues she had. And my son had crawled into bed with my husband, my son with epilepsy. At about 3 a.m, my husband came downstairs and said, Sawyer, my son with epilepsy, just had a seizure. And I said, no, he didn't. I was so in denial. And when I went up there, he seemed okay. He said he didn't have a seizure. He didn't remember anything, which is typical. So I just thought my husband was on hyper alert from our daughter's diagnosis. Okay. However, after that day, he had kept coming into our bedroom throughout the night. It started out with what we thought was TMJ. His jaw would just get stuck to the side. So we thought it was an issue with his jaw. We talked to our dentist, and December 7th, we had an appointment to go to the dentist to get a mouth guard for our son to hopefully stop his jaw from getting stuck, is what we thought. December 7th, about 5 a.m, I had all 3 of my younger kids in my bed, and I heard my son moaning, and I said, Sawyer, what's wrong? And he responded, but it was very muffled and you couldn't really make out what he was saying. And I said, what's wrong? What's going on? And he said, I have to go to the bathroom, but it wasn't his normal tone. So I said, go. And he said he couldn't. So I went over to where he was sleeping in my bed, and I kind of tried to lift him up, and his entire left side was not functioning. It seemed like he was intoxicated. When I tried to stand him up, he couldn't stand up. So as a mom and not educated in anything medical, I thought he had a stroke. because his left side just was not functioning. So he kept saying he had to go to the bathroom. I brought him downstairs. Our neighbor across the street was a police officer, so I called him, called my husband, who was already at work. So I went to the bathroom, put him on the couch, and he just turned his head to the left and went completely unresponsive. I called 911, and my neighbor had come at that point, and he knew what to do because I did not. And he was taken to the ER and then down to Children's after that.
And then that's when he was actually diagnosed.
Yep. Had an EEG overnight and then was diagnosed with epilepsy the next day. So.
Okay. So sometimes for parents, which, as you know, I've talked about, my son doesn't suffer from epilepsy. You know, parents don't know that right away, that that's what it is. So you were thinking before that it was something completely different until this major episode happened that got you to the hospital, which then got you that diagnosis.
Correct.
And I know that, which we'll touch on a little bit later in this segment, is that for November, you know that it is Epilepsy Awareness Month, but it is also Diabetes Awareness Month as well. And that is what her daughter has too. So we'll kind of touch base on that, but staying on the track for epilepsy. So you go to Children's, he stays overnight. And what was the information? Because if you've kind of followed over this last week, and then we had our SUDEP week a few, about a week and a half ago, that we were looking at, like, what are parents being told? So here you go, he has this overnight EEG, you're told he has epilepsy, and now what? Like, what were the next steps they told you to do? What were the resources they gave you?
So we go to the hospital and we stay overnight, and as a parent, you don't sleep that night. You don't know what's going on with your child. You don't know what is going to happen. And the next day, they kind of fill you with a ton of information on what just happened, what the next steps are. So a lot of it, for me as a parent, I didn't retain a lot of that information because it was like, what?
It was like a hurricane coming at you.
Correct.
And you were just trying to stay standing.
So their next steps were they were going to try medication with him, which we tried our first medication. They gave him a big dose right away to try and stop the seizures.
Okay.
Which in his case, the certain medication that he was on caused him, we saw a change in him immediately.
Okay.
As far as how he was always my calm child, he went from being calm to being extremely active. And as the days went on and the medicine continued, it was more anger. He displayed a lot more anger with that. And the other information that we got from the doctor was they don't know why. They did an MRI to see if there was tumors or any brain damage or anything that they could say that this is why he has the epilepsy. But there was nothing for Sawyer, and they said that they probably will never know why it started. So that we're just going to try and medicate and
so that was it. Did they give you different, support groups where you can find, greater resources on that, how often you manage it, what you do, if the seizures are continuing, what are those, next steps there? And the major question that we've been talking about for the last week and a half, did they have any conversation with you about SUDEP or this whole journey? Because I know that you're at a different place now a year later than you were, at that beginning. But that very beginning stage, really, it was just kind of like, this is what he has.
Yes.
Come back for your normal checkups.
Correct. If it was more information on what to do with Sawyer. There was not a whole lot of, there wasn't any information on support groups or anything along those lines. It was all, okay, he has seizures in the right side of his brain. You need to watch his seizures. If he has them, you need to time them. Here's rescue meds. Here's how to use this. It was just survival for Sawyer. It wasn't anything more than that. Okay.
And so now and now you have your daughter that has diabetes. You have Sawyer who has epilepsy. What has your journey been like with the epilepsy over this last year? And I know that me and you developed, as our friendship has developed more and more, it seems like a lot of unanswered questions and a lot of frustration. And the reason that I think it's so valuable, to have Amanda's message here as well today is that I know that when I started my journey, that those first 5 years, 7 years were extremely frustrating because you're pounding and you're pounding and you're pounding and you're pounding at all of this without the answers, and that other parents need to know that, there's other people that are frustrated just as well. But hopefully by putting out there some of these questions that we have towards epilepsy, we will get more of the community that surrounds the epileptic community to be able to give those, answers and some of those resources that are missing. So I know you made a list for us. We want to know it.
Yes.
Throw it at us.
So first I want to say to any parents that are out there that are just coming into this, you have to be an advocate for your child. Now, starting out, it's a huge job and you don't know where to start. What is being an advocate to my child? Do I start with support groups? Do I start with the doctors? And which doctors? Because there's so many doctors all of a sudden. But you have to start somewhere and find a support group, find a mom that's been in this journey for a while and listen to what she has to say. That's, I guess, my best advice for that. Yeah. But my top 10 most frustrating things about epilepsy is that there isn't a lot of answers to why this is happening to him, what it means for his future. And epilepsy is there's so many differences between different types of seizures and where different people with epilepsy are. Sawyer does not have daily seizures as far as we know right now. However, we are struggling with finding a medication to control his seizures. And they do seem like they have progressed from where we started. So,
so really there needs to be, to get some of these answers, I feel that goes back to the thing that more research needs to be done, which then more people need to be talking about it, which means that even when we talk about SUDEP and all of that stuff, I mean, there just needs to be so much more precedence put on it, numbers gathered so that research dollars can be allotted towards funding to try to get some of those answered, because it does seem like a very unknown condition that doesn't have a lot of answers, but it has a lot of helpless feelings for a lot of parents.
Correct. And when you are a parent of a child that has had a seizure and you're standing in a room full of doctors and the neurologist tells you, we don't know why, that is a very scary feeling as a parent. But they don't. The brain is very complex and they don't know everything about it. And I do agree that they do need much more research on why it is happening. Number two, finding a medication that works. That is very difficult because every person is different. Medication works differently for everybody. This medication might work for somebody, but this one might not work for somebody else. And that is a struggle that we are having. We are on our second medication, which now required a bridge medication as well to stop him from seizing, because he had 2 grand mals and a partial in one day, which was not his normal.
Trying to get those medications controlled, but it seems like it's a lot of, from what I've been hearing, and anyone can comment on this on the live feed. I don't usually look at it during the time here, but if you do have a amount of medications, have they ever told you like how many different diversities there are in medications to try? Do they have like an A, B, C, D, E kind of?
Kind of, yeah. They have ones that all of the medications have some sort of side effects. We started with the least and we're kind of working our way up. The side effects are, some of them can be, pretty harsh. So me as a parent, I don't want to put something in my child's body that could potentially damage a different organ of his, but at the same time, we have to find something that will work.
Right.
So it's very difficult.
And so with the doctors, where I think that comes in a lot of times with, advocating with families and whatnot, is sitting down with those doctors and getting a game plan and having your team, as we've talked about, that medical team, and saying, if this doesn't work, this is our next course of action. Because I think that sometimes, don't you agree that, when you go in and you went all the way to the hospital and you went to the appointment to not get any answers or even any plan. Because, we don't need to have the answers because doctors aren't God and they don't know everything. But at least to construct, okay, you're going to go home and you're going to try this. And as frustrating as it may be, it may not work at all. But we're going to come back and then this is going to be our next plan. At least you know that they're on Team Sawyer.
Yes. And that they have a plan B. Because a lot of these I don't knows and trial and errors are very hard as a parent to do with your child because you are emotionally involved, whereas a doctor, you're not emotionally involved with the child. So it might be, okay, well, we know that we can do this and we know that we can try this next, but thinking of the parents and their fear of what's going to happen now with my child if this doesn't work.
Right. So, and I think when you have that, I think planning and being organized, you know what I'm saying? And feeling like, as all of us in the world of special needs and different medical illnesses and conditions, the more organized we can be and the more that we feel that we have the knowledge that produces power within us to say, okay, I know if it's not a right fit, we have at least this to try. And then if that doesn't work, then we have at least this to try and we're going to exhaust this and this. But at least you know that there's another stone to turn versus if you're just like, we have no idea.
Yeah.
And they leave, it makes you feel as if the doctor hasn't really dug very deep to work with you.
Your confidence in the doctor declines.
Right.
Very much so. Number 3 is along with epilepsy comes usually, not in every case, but ADHD, ADD, and or depression, which we had a neuropsych done, and Sawyer was diagnosed with ADHD, and he was on the borderline of depression, which are 2 other things that we have to tackle, I guess.
Right.
So it wasn't just the seizures for him. There's other things, underlining issues going on. The problem with ADHD is sometimes the ADHD medicines, from what we were told, can trigger seizures.
Right.
So it's a hard balance of what you want, how you want to manage your child's care.
Right. And sometimes one thing plays into another. And over my 21 years, I found that this is counteracting this. And sometimes the diagnosis of this wasn't even the right diagnosis to begin with, because it's because of all of this other stuff going on that this is happening, and trying to put that puzzle together.
And he could have very well had the ADHD before, and the epilepsy has just brought it out. We don't really know. We probably never will. But it is also difficult because now with this new diagnosis of ADHD, this is something that his pediatrician needs to handle. However, if I feel as a parent, if this is something that could trigger seizures, we also need to have the neurologist involved. And if
we have a friend here. Why don't we stop for a second? Let's introduce you. She's sitting in here with us. This is reality TV today. Can you say hi? Say hi. She wants a sucker. She's been sitting so nicely. All right. All right.
So it's hard to manage all of the doctors. And we have 4 children in our family. And as Tammy said, we have another child that was diagnosed with type 1. So we have a lot of doctor's appointments and a lot of just daily life. And to try and get to the pediatricians and to the neurologists and to the endos, managing all of that as a parent is extremely difficult.
Right.
As you know.
Yes. So. Yes. It's been the hospital hustle this week. It's going to be, I'm going to get a new shirt that says that. Everybody, for all of us moms and dads, are on the hospital hustle.
Yeah.
Going around from spot to spot, and the coordination. And I think that comes into is advocating for having continuity of care between all of your doctors talking to each other, but then that coordination of care where you can say, hey, I'm driving an hour to this place. Can we combine our blood draws, our EEG, and our appointment with all in that same time, so that if you do have multiple members, multiple kids in your family, and you're supposed to be going each way, that we don't completely lose our mind. We all already know that we're a little bit of a whirlwind all of the time, but that helps. All right. I missed what number we were on.
We're on number 4.
I was on Team Sucker. Get the sucker.
So his learning, number 4 is his learning went down in school. We just had recently a conference with his teachers, and he's currently in 3rd grade. His 3rd grade teacher was also his 1st grade teacher. And so we took a look at his MAP testing. He has an IEP, so he does deal with the special needs teachers. And I love their school. The teacher was in there, the special needs teacher, the reading specialist, they were all there. We took a look at his MAP testing, and it is steadily declining in both reading and math. His height of his MAP testing was at the end of 1st grade, and he is currently testing. I have also, my type 1 is a 1st grader, and they're testing exactly the same level. So why this is happening, I don't know. It's very scary. What does that mean for his future? Does this mean that he's going to continually go down? Does this mean he's going to be able to catch up? Why is it happening? And there's really no good answers for that. I kind of brought it up to the doctors, and they don't know if it's the ADHD, if it's the epilepsy, or what is causing the decline. So that's another frustration.
And as we've talked to, digging. Holy Toledo, she finished this. No, we have to stay in here, honey. Oh, she listens so good. None of my kids listen like that anymore because they're all old. She just went and put her little headphones back on. I think that all of those answers, when we build that medical team that's on Team Sawyer, all the time, I think that does help that a lot, to come together to do additional testing to try to figure out where some of that may be coming from, to get some answers. But I know, what's scary to me to think is that there are so many parents, as we all embark on this and we find out about it as the kind of like the newbie parents that are in this world, is that we are at the doctor's sometimes 3 to 4 days a week, and you could be there 3 to 4 days a week and you still don't know the answers to all these questions. That means that somehow the information that's supposed to be being fed to you and articulated to you and supported to you, it isn't there. And they're not speaking our language, which definitely needs to change, and more of that patient continuity of care, sitting down, having more team meetings and planning and, all of that, which I find that, you find 50% of physicians that do it and 50% who don't.
And a lot of times I think it does feel like we are just a number in our care. Nobody's checked up on us. And a lot of times it gets busy during the week with all of the kids and all of the appointments and all of the things. And I do try and write things down, but even a check-in once a month would be nice to see how things are going. If we have any new questions, if something new came up. And we do use my chart, which is where we kind of were directed, which I don't particularly care for.
I just had this conversation. So on my hospital hustle this last week, because that's where I've been like all week long, I was having a discussion with some of the doctors to kind of say, if you really want your answers, you're not going to do it. You're not going to do it via my chart. And so in different states, I know they call it something different. A lot of times it's different Epic, like computer systems, where you can visually look at your medical stuff. Here in the state of Wisconsin, we call it my chart, where you can go back and you can send a message to the doctor. You can look at labs and x-rays and different things that way. But if you truly want an answer from your doctor or to get in for that appointment, I always say still the squeaky wheel gets the oil. Like, you got to get on that phone and you have to be heard. Sending that my chart isn't always the best. But I know that is something, since my chart has come out, that I've heard a ton of other parents say to me as I'm advocating for others, is that, oh, my doctor told me to use my chart. Oh, that's the way that they want us to communicate. Oh, that's the way that they want us to do that. They're getting hundreds of messages. And where do you think yours lies in there? Yeah. Because if you look at my chart, when you go on it or whatever computer system, it says, if it's of urgent need, call 911. Yes. Or if it's of urgent need where it is important to you, go to the ER. So they're kind of putting it very quietly out there to say, we're really going to take this as it comes and when we're in the office.
And as a parent trying to decide what to me, everything's an emergency.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know any of the answers. I have no medical background. So I don't really know what I'm doing. So trying to depict what is, obviously if he's having a seizure and struggling,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the obvious, but when I need some answers, I'm not really sure how to go about getting them, because I don't know what they consider urgent, what they want me to my chart, and what, you know, can wait.
Right.
So being a new parent to all of this, I don't know a lot of it, and a lot of it is changing constantly with him. So that's difficult, knowing which route to go and when.
Right. And I think that's across the board. And that's why this is so relevant, is that you are definitely not alone as parents in this, in trying to figure it out in that very beginning, until you get your pattern, until you get like your army action plan. Like,
yeah.
How are you going to attack and go after all the questions that you have?
Yeah.
You know,
it's very much like being dropped off in a foreign country and just
like, figure it out.
Yeah, good luck.
Good luck. I hope it all works out.
So number 5 for me is nighttime. So Sawyer started out in his with his seizures mainly at night. When he had his first EEG, it showed that his spikes were in the evening, particularly around him falling asleep and waking up. And as a parent, I am not sleeping because I am afraid I'm going to miss something. His seizures, when they first started, were not grand mal, so he didn't thrash around. So they have alarms and things for that. But his weren't like that, so they don't have really anything so I could time a seizure, see a seizure, you know, just figure out what is going on, how often he's having them. That is a very hard.
She's going to join us in the interview.
Yeah, that is a very hard thing for me to try and manage, is nighttime and sleeping. And then along with that is his freedoms. So he is 9 right now, but we do not allow him to lock the doors. So if he's going to the bathroom, he cannot lock the door, because if he were to have a seizure while he's going to the bathroom, we need to be able to get to him. Same with showering. However, he doesn't like that. We have obviously a little one that likes to just open doors if they're not locked, and he doesn't want his little sister just walking in. So we're having a hard time managing.
Right, him having his own kind of personal space.
Correct. Yes.
So,
and those two, I feel like, are kind of, because he doesn't have any personal space even when he sleeps. We now have a video camera on him, so when he sleeps, I have a monitor in my room so I can see what's happening in his room, but he has no privacy. So I don't know how to
give him that. So that would be a good question to throw out there for other moms that are in this situation. And so maybe if you have some ideas for Amanda, you could drop those. You could drop those below as well. Please for those that are in that same circumstance and have traveled that road. I think that's very relevant, because as he gets older,
it's going to even get worse.
Right.
So that was my number 5. Number 6, caregiver care. So this is our story, because we had 2 big diagnoses, one right after the other. Where is the care for the caregiver? We, because our kids have these medical needs, our sitters are afraid of taking care of our kids. So we don't really have babysitters. We don't have any close family that would or is able to help us. So caregiver care, I feel, is just as important as caring for the child with medical needs.
Right.
When you're on an airplane and they're going through their thing in the beginning, they tell you about the mask, and you have to put the mask on yourself before you can put it on your child. As a parent, you don't ever do that. You always are doing for your child until you are completely defeated. And how do you revive yourself? Because this is not an easy thing to deal with. And it's very draining on the entire family as a whole. So finding places that you can get help with care for yourself is something that we haven't.
And also, finding respite for you so that you have helpers that can help so that you can go and care for yourself. And, if you guys are following, we are kicking off our caregiver celebration 2018, November 1st, because it is National Family Caregivers Month. And that is the battle across the United States and beyond is the caregiver crisis. There isn't people. Everyone is underpaid. If you, can get help, people don't want to take on the responsibility because, it is a big load when someone else is saying that I'm going to care for your child with medical, issues or different abilities or your elderly loved one or anyone that's in that caregiver, situation. And so between the lack of funding, lack of resources, lack of establishments that can help, it leaves us all extremely depleted in our own energies. And we know when we look back at that, well, then a lot of times that compromises our health, but we are the only ones that are left to care for our loved ones. So it's a big circle. And that's why for the month of November, over here at the Honor Advocate, we are campaigning hard to use our voice and show our faces, all the faces and the voices of caregivers across the United States and around the world. And the great need there is for further funding and whatnot, because I think that struggle is real for me. It's real for you. It's real for thousands, hundreds of thousands, the 65 million caregivers. There's 65 million caregivers just in the United States alone.
Yeah.
40 million of them receive no funding, 40 million out of 65 million. So, that's something that needs to change, but I second number 6.
Yeah.
I second it.
Well, and especially when you're getting so much information thrown at you and you are depleted, and to go with number 5, I don't sleep at nighttime because I'm afraid that's when my children have the hardest time. And so when you don't care for yourself and you're not sleeping, and you're trying to make life decisions for your children, it's just not
for the quality of their life and their care. And you don't have a clear mind.
Correct.
To think of what is that next step going to be and what is that process going to be.
Putting together a team and knowing where to start. Yeah, It's very difficult. Number 7 is his embarrassment from having seizures. So Sawyer is very embarrassed of when he has seizures, he tries to hide them. If they're just the partials, he'll lose part of his body and he tries to hide it. There has been times where I'll be watching his monitor as he's falling asleep and I will see unusual movements and I see him quick try and stop the movements, unusual movements of his mouth where he quick tries to put his hand over his mouth. And then when I go ask him, he is kind of in, no, that didn't happen because he's embarrassed. I'm very thankful so far he hasn't had a seizure at school, but I don't feel like there's enough information for people that don't deal with epilepsy every day on what it is and how on what it is and how that it doesn't make him different, I guess. So
for him feeling acceptance at school,
correct,
and feeling acceptance with his condition that he does have,
because it is scary when he has seizures and the kids don't know, they don't know what's happening or why it's happening, and we really don't either. So that's hard as a parent to face his embarrassment for it. So
right. Oh, we might be running out of time, folks. We might be running out of time. We might be running out of time with the suckers. I think all the suckers are gone.
In a minute, okay?
We got 2 more minutes. All right, let's cruise through the rest of these numbers. And, I'm going to speak to that a little bit later, maybe when we wrap up that number 7 for school.
Sure. And then another one is number 8 is how illness affects his seizures. A simple cold can cause him to have seizures, where I never thought that would happen. So we are constantly on germ patrol. We don't want germs in our home.
Right.
Whereas before you never really thought about it that much until now. Cared. I thought, well, they're healthy. They can. And I always used to say that I was holistic but realistic. So I was a parent that didn't do immunizations. I always said that if my kids got sick, they would be able to fight it off. However, we are currently now in the process of getting immunizations because they have underlying conditions that this could be very serious if they caught anything.
Right.
So just the change, it really rocked our world because we are very natural, as much as possible. And
I think as you go along this journey, and I'm sure that there's other moms that can speak to this, is that, you know, trying out so many different types of things over time. I mean, I think that if the decision between you and your doctor and your team is for vaccinations, that's one thing. But, you know, that holistic approach, I know there's a lot of parents, especially when we talk about epilepsy, juvenile arthritis, all of those things, that have looked for more of the homeopathic approaches.
Absolutely.
To things because they've exhausted. And for a lot of them, it's like they've exhausted the regular medications, or the regular medications have side effects to them. And, you know, what I speak to a lot of the time is it is about choice. This is a no judgment zone. It's about trying different things and seeing what's going to work for your loved one, whether they're a child or whether they're, you know, your elderly loved one or in between. That's really the goal out of all of it, is to create choice.
I agree. And like I said, I was holistic, and like we didn't, my kids were never even on antibiotics before any of these things happened. And I do believe it is absolutely 100% your choice on what, if you do a holistic approach, and if you do a more medically based, right? Is that what you call it? Medically based approach? I do feel like both of them will work, you know, or you'll find a happy place for that. But yes. Okay. Number 8.
She's flipping her page.
We're getting there.
This is like the first time. Isn't
write
this
it.
exciting? Like, we're here, we're hanging out in my little real room right here together.
Number 9 is information overload. And I think I kind of covered number 9 a little bit earlier, is where you're just in so much of a fog and you get so much information thrown at you. I know that a lot of times I have to go back and say, wait, what did you tell me about this, about where his seizures are, and what else I should be doing, what else I should be looking for, because it is a lot of information to be thrown at you. Especially I have no medical background, so I was coming from a place of 0. So
starting from point.
Yes.
Point 1.
So I would say number 9 is information overload, and how to manage the information that you do receive.
And something just to speak to number 9 real quick is that I always say, if you're going into an appointment, you're getting huge information and they're asking you to make decisions, know that it is always your right to say, I'm going to go home and we'll make another appointment in a day or 2. You know, when you get all of that information thrown at you, sometimes we need a moment to process it. And sometimes, depending on the information, we might need a moment to cry about it. And when we're crying about something, or we're getting very emotionally involved with something, we don't make good medical decisions. It's just a fact. And so we need that time to get those emotions out, to process through them, and then to sit down with a clear mind and say, okay, do I like that next step they're talking about? Do I want to seek a second opinion? You know, what is going to be my strategy? And then coming back to those doctors with your questions. Like I always tell people to prep questions before they go. That way, when we get kind of emotional, you know, we don't have that moment of forgetting, oh, what was I going to ask? And then you get home and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't ask what I, you know, had on my list for the last 3 months to ask.
And that is probably the best piece of advice that I was given, was to write things down, because I get in the doctor's office and I ask my first question. She's giving me the information. I'm processing that. I don't even remember any other question. So writing it down, definitely helps me go through my list, and then I can write down her information that she's given me, or ask her to print some things off for me so I can look that over and process that even further as I go home. Number 10 is, and again, I think I touched on this one, is the setup of caregivers in his life, setting up of his team. From the beginning, it's very difficult because, like I said, you have the neurologist, the pediatrician, then now the school's involved, you know, because we have an IEP, we have special needs doctors, we have
your neuropsych team that's involved with having your daughter with diabetes.
And I am the one that communicates with all of them. So I don't feel like they communicate as well with each other, as it's me having to go to all of these different people and let them know what this one said, or how, you know, what information this person has, to best care for Sawyer. So
bringing that all together. But I think as you're finding your mama bear, it's coming out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. The longer we hang out together.
and it is. At first I was very passive and okay, this is what they said I have to do. Okay. And as time goes on, you do find that inner mama bear where I know Sawyer better than anybody. They know a lot of, about epilepsy, but I know a lot about Sawyer. And so bringing those two things together, I think is what is the best for Sawyer, and just finding my inner voice to advocate for him.
To do that. And as you build your team, always having that nucleus, that center. Who is that center person and how do they offshoot from that? For many, that center person starts out with having your rock star pediatrician and then those people going out from there.
Okay.
Oh, she's got to go potty.
She can go by herself.
Does she know it? Oh.
She's good. Yeah.
This is like real action right here, right now. This never happens at the On Air Advocate. This never happens right now. She's going to ask you where's the bathroom.
Yep, just 1 minute.
Do you want to go with her and I'll talk just for 1 second?
Sorry,
okay.
Guys.
All right, she'll come back in here in a second. So I think as we've talked about a lot, finding that nucleus or that center of your medical team is so important. And for Amanda, I've talked to her a lot about that being that pediatrician, especially when we're talking about our, younger children. And even as they age into their young adult years, and then those people offshooting from that, because like when they're chatting and they're not all chatting together, usually if you have that main person in the middle that's going to hub and wrangle them all in, you will have greater success with that. And, I really wanted to bring today, like I said, more of reality and real life of things that within my path, and I'm sure within so many of, other advocates out there, as well as caregivers, our path of other parents we meet that are just beginning their journey, that we all don't start from that same spot, at that beginning as that tidal wave comes. And sometimes when we put on and we see shows or programs or go to speaking engagements, we're seeing someone who has developed over, a half a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, and we're getting information from them. And so, I really want to campaign, whether it be epilepsy, whether it be diabetes, whether it be other chronic medical conditions, other kind, any type of special needs, that parents realize within all of this that they are not alone. When we look at statistically that 70% of caregivers suffer from depression. Then we look at the fact that 35% of those are considered severe clinically depressed. Those are huge numbers. And so we need to know that on this journey that we're not alone and that we all started from that same place of being like, what? What's going on? All right, she's back to wrap this up. And I think that you bring also the element where you have 2 different children, 2 totally different ages. One's a boy, one's a girl, one's diabetic. And when we did our series on diabetes, and this month we are going to have some of our friends back on about that again, I have found that it is crazy, just like epilepsy, in the sense that there's not a lot of, okay, here's the medication, it's going to fix it, right?
Correct.
Is that what you have found?
In both of the diabetes and epilepsy, there is, we live in the gray area. There's no black and white in anything in either one of them. So everything's kind of trial and error and learning as we go. So
right.
Yeah.
And so to other parents, I met you kind of at I would say the first couple months of your journey.
Yes.
And what would your best advice now that you're a year in, what would your advice to have done sooner, than you did?
Yeah. Contact a mom that's further along in the journey. A lot of times you get stuck as a parent. I heard you talking about depression. It is a very hard blow when your kids are forever ill. So finding a mom that's been on the journey for a while, getting her advice, seeing how to start, because it's so overwhelming. And self-care. taking care of yourself. It is so important and so difficult at the same time. You're so focused on your child that you forget yourself. And I think that until you're a healthy person, it's very hard to take care of somebody else.
Right. And I think you kind of lose yourself already. I mean, it's only been a year, but I know that for so many of us, you know, you kind of, your whole world becomes like, you used to be in career and, you know, your job and you're doing this, and now your whole world is like figuring out what's going on medically, and you're speaking to people in a medical tone, and it's all about advocacy and it's all about support. And
your world completely gets flipped upside down. And changes, and it's and it changes really fast, and it's really hard. It's really hard to cope with. But.
And friendships, you know, I know that in my journey, I can tell you that when my son was born, you know, I had this slew of friends. Now, granted, when Marcus was born, I was 21 years old, and I had this, and I really didn't know what was going on. I was like, what in the world? He's got all these things. But I had all these friends, and they were there. And then he was born, and then they were gone, you know? And so, and I feel like that plays into sometimes our depression, as, you know what I'm saying, as
Absolutely.
well, in that sadness, because they don't understand. We're not looking for anyone to have the answer, because we don't even have the answer, but that support. Hey, how are you doing?
It is
okay.
Yeah, it is. That to me was probably one of the hardest and most surprising parts of this is when we got our first diagnosis, our friends were supportive. Oh, that stinks. If you need anything, let me know. And then, you know, they were gone. And a lot of it is because you don't have time. You're going to the doctor, you're learning, you know, and to stay in touch with friends is hard. But you do make new friends, and friends that understand it on a level that, you know, you don't even have to tell them, you know, they just understand, which is something that I have found amazing. Yeah.
Right. It's like it doesn't matter where you live, where you are, if you are on a caregiver journey together, it is like you meet someone, you could have completely separate conditions, and it's like right away you connect because we're all in that same body of water. We're just on, you know, different ships.
Yeah.
You know, but I tell people, you know, sometimes there does become some resentment, anger towards family members and friends that don't understand. I always say that we can't damn anybody for not understanding, but we need to preach, and we need to let them know what's going on, because just like us, we didn't know. And so when my friends now are like, well, aren't you going out? Well, aren't you going somewhere? Okay, I don't know. Do we have that discussion before?
Yes.
You know, like my life is the life of a caregiver. You know, I have a son that's going to be 21 that needs full care, which means that I'm not going somewhere unless he's coming with me. And so letting people know the reality of it, I think, as powerful moms, and as, you know, you find your inner mama bear, you know, it keeps rising. We just make things look sometimes easy, and we do it so people don't even like think twice that possibly, you know, that you might be struggling. They don't think twice about that. Oh, well, I see she took pictures on Facebook and she was at the grocery store. I mean, did they know how many kids were with you? Did they know what you were, you know, that you were doing? And so I think that making others aware, the same thing when we talk about like the caregiver crisis. How many people do you know that there's 65 million caregivers in the United States? Yeah. Do they know that there's a caregiver crisis? Do they know that there's no help? You know, I would say that probably 95% of the population doesn't know that, because you don't usually embrace it unless you're experiencing it yourself. You know, and sometimes I have found that to be therapeutic to my friends that are not in that world. Just be like, okay, this is really real. This is what's going on, and being honest. And hopefully that they're that kind of friend that's going to travel that journey.
And advocating for your children is extremely important. But advocating for yourself, we forget to do a lot. And being honest with your friends, because like you said, it's sometimes we like to, we're fine, we're okay, we're going to get this. But, you know, sometimes just being honest and saying, I'm not okay. I'm not feeling good about any of these things. They are difficult. This journey's hard, you know, and it's hard on the whole family. And I think
you're going to make me cry, because I know.
But, just advocating for yourself and being honest. And, you know, a lot of times those friends don't understand, because we do make it look like we're put together and we have control of everything. And maybe just letting them know, you know, that's not reality.
Right.
So, sorry.
No, and that is what, the point of this today, and, other moms that are on, but I think sometimes when we see all these moms that have already, or dads or providers that have already traveled this journey, you see them all put together. And I can tell you that, my journey comes with a whole bunch of highs and lows and a whole bunch of tears. And, when you see me on the regular basis, Amanda is actually a trainer for my son and helps him through his therapies and his exercises and whatnot. And you know what? There's many hot mess days.
Oh, yes.
And there's many, you're on the hospital run and you've been going and you haven't slept in 2 days. And, and it's the same thing because the journey doesn't end. This is the long run. This isn't a sprint. It is a marathon. And it is, for a lot of people, it is a forever thing for decades and decades. And so it is something that, if you don't keep yourself cognizant of sadness and realize that how it creeps up on you and realize that to try to find those other connections to help that. I think that's where those statistics are coming in. I think that they're very, very real. I don't think they're fabricated whatsoever. That 70% of all caregivers experience that, and 35 to 40% at a severe rate to be, on medication and everything else.
And I think too, like none of us want to admit that we're struggling, that we're, we have Facebook where we put our best features
space,
there. Nobody wants to put on Facebook, I'm having a horrible day. I just spent the whole day crying, because, so, like I said, just being honest with your friends and with your family and with yourself really on how you're feeling and how you're coping. I know that as we approached a year of our diagnoses, I struggled really hard, because it became a forever thing for me. The first year is just get through it. And as we got through that, then it was just 1 minute, almost done. It was this is forever. So,
right. And it is a forever journey.
Yes, yes it is.
It is. And sometimes, I think that people will say it's not something that tomorrow you're gonna go to the doctor and it's going to be something that's going to be gone. She's ready to go again. All right. So on that note, we could talk for hours. We're going to say goodbye to the folks. Okay. All right, we're going to do this. We're going to end the show together. All right. So on that note, I thank you all for tuning in. Make sure that you tune in for the rest of the week for our Epilepsy Awareness Week. We will be also touching on the Diabetes Awareness Month as well for November. Remember that November is National Family Caregivers Month. There is going to be tons of promotions and stuff coming out because we want to see your faces and hear your voices and all that other good stuff. Do you think she's ready? Is she ready for TV? Is she ready to do this? Is she ready to do this? Okay, so on that note, if you guys want any more information about the On Air Advocate, you're just going to head on over to onairadvocate.com and it's all going to be there. I thank you, Amanda, as my friend, as another mom, for doing this, today, sharing where your struggles are, your story, bringing your little one along so that we can have some kids on the show too. I appreciate your realness and your transparency. And so on that note, thank you guys very much for tuning in this morning and looking forward to seeing you guys. I'm not sure. I think I might be back on tomorrow. All right. Have a fabulous Tuesday, everybody. Bye-bye. Can you wave bye-bye?
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye to everyone. Oh, yay. We get a wave. All right. Thanks, guys.